very, very early on the Wednesday morning between the death and the funeral. And I just sat down and wrote it, and it took about an hour and a half, and just came pouring out, really. Actually, it's interesting. Sounds rather sort of bizarre, but I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it, and
the night before the most watched funeral of the 20th century, a man walked alone into a room with his dead sister's coffin, unfolded a piece of paper, and read every single word of it to her. Not to a camera, not to a rehearsal audience, to Diana. He wanted her to hear it first. That man was Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, the youngest brother of the most photographed woman who ever lived. And what he read to her that night was not just a eulogy. It was a vow, a promise made in private before the world ever heard a syllable of it. And for nearly 3 decades since, with zero fanfare and zero press releases, he has kept every word of it. No documentaries, no memoir deals, no carefully timed exclusives to friendly press. Just silence and a guilt so private and so deep that people close to him say it has quietly shaped every decision he has made since the day they buried Diana on that island at Althorpe. So when a glossy documentary proposal landed on his desk in early 2026, carrying the logos of Netflix, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Charles Spencer read it, set it down, and replied with exactly 4 words. Is this a joke? Those 4 words were not arrogance. They were not old money, contempt for the cameras. They were 28 years of answers, compressed into a single sentence. Music and Harry, of all people, never saw it coming. Tonight, I'm going to show you everything. The pitch, the secret they were counting on him to keep, and why that 4-word reply may have just changed the Sussex story forever. Who is Charles Spencer, and why has the world forgotten him? Before we go a single step further, let me ask you something. When did you last think about Charles Spencer? Not Diana, not Harry, not William. Charles Spencer specifically. Most people, if they are honest, can name exactly one moment. Westminster Abbey, September 6, 1997. A global audience of roughly 2 billion people. A young man in a black suit standing at a lectern speaking words so charged they detonated applause from the streets outside and rolled it like thunder into the nave of the church. He promised, and this is the word that matters, promised, that Diana's sons would be raised with warmth and imagination, shielded from the cold institutional rigidity that had crushed their mother. He promised her blood family would never let the system have them. He said it to the Queen's face, to Prince Philip's face, to the future king sitting feet away. He said it in front of 2 billion witnesses, and he did not flinch once. And then he disappeared back into Northamptonshire. That is the last time most people clocked him. And that invisibility, that long deliberate silence, is precisely what makes what is happening now so significant. Because Charles Spencer is 62 years old, the head of a family that has held its land for 5 centuries, and he has spent every year since 1997 doing something almost no figure connected to Diana has ever managed. He kept his promise. Think about that. In a media ecosystem built entirely on Diana, her face on magazine covers, her dresses in museums, her voice in documentaries, her image on everything from postage stamps to perfume bottles. Charles Spencer has never once monetized the access he has, never sold the archive, never licensed the grounds, never given an interview that opened the vault even a crack. Every Diana documentary you have ever watched was built from the same public domain footage, the same recycled clips, the same photographs the whole world already owns. Charles Spencer has never loaned the originals. Not once. Ask yourself why. And then ask yourself what it would take, what level of trust, what purity of purpose for a man like that to finally open the door. Now watch who came knocking and what they brought with them. It started as so many things in this family do with something small and beautiful and apparently innocent. The royal wedding, 2018. The evening reception. Meghan Markle arrived wearing Diana's aquamarine ring, that pale blue stone instantly recognizable to anyone who had ever followed Diana's story. And in that first moment from where Charles Spencer stood watching, it probably felt rather lovely. Someone new, someone his nephew adored, choosing to carry Diana into the most important night of her life. It felt like remembrance. Maybe it even felt like family. Then came the butterfly earrings. Then the Cartier tank watch. Then the gold bracelets. Piece by piece, appearance by appearance, each item that had once belonged to Diana surfaced on Meghan at precisely the moments where photography was not merely likely. It was guaranteed. Major events, carefully choreographed arrivals, maximum lens coverage. Now, let me be fair because fairness matters on this channel. And I want you to hold this thought. No one can prove the intentions were anything other than genuine tribute. Grief does strange and tender things inside families. And Meghan was newly married into one of the most emotionally complex dynasties in history. But here is the question I want you to sit with. When does tribute become pattern? When does pattern become strategy? Once is tribute, twice is habit. Every single timed to a guaranteed camera. That is a decision. And the man at Althorpe was watching. Keep that in mind, because the jewelry was only the opening act. What came next is where, by most accounts, the warmth reportedly began to curdle into something very different. The Oprah interview and a ghost in the architecture. March 2021. You remember it. The whole planet remembers it. But I want you to remember it the way Charles Spencer reportedly watched it alone from the house where Diana grew up. The lighting was low and golden. The setting was soft, intimate, confessional. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one faceless institution that had, she said, silenced her, dismissed her mental health, left her isolated with no door open except the door to the public. If you are a royal watcher with any serious knowledge of recent history, the chill of recognition hit you immediately, because that is almost beam for beam the architecture of Diana's 1995 Panorama interview. Run the comparison yourself side by side. A royal wife isolated speaking of an institution deaf to her suffering. The palace has closed every door. So she goes over its head straight to the public through one trusted interviewer. Hushed lighting, a confessional stillness. The sense of secrets finally escaping. Identical. Every element rhymed. The lighting rhymed. The grammar of victimhood rhymed. The casting rhymed. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer. One faceless institution. There is only one element that changed, and it is the most telling difference of all. Diana gave her 1995 interview while trapped inside the system with no exit in sight and everything to lose. The 2021 version was filmed from a villa in California. After the exit, with a production apparatus attached and a streaming deal already negotiated, the original was a cry for help. The remake, whatever else you believe about it, was a launch. And watching from the house where his sister grew up, Charles Spencer reportedly did not experience that hour as a tribute. How could he? Because of what you are about to learn. Something about this man's history with Panorama. A history so painful and so personal that it explains everything about what happened next. The secret, the guilt that built the vault. This is the part of the story most coverage never touches. And it is the key that unlocks everything. By long-standing accounts, it was Charles Spencer himself who first brought his sister into contact with Martin Basher, the journalist behind that 1995 Panorama interview. The same interview the world now knows was obtained through forged documents and calculated psychological manipulation, fabricated bank statements, fake evidence of surveillance, manufactured proof of betrayal. All of it designed to convince a frightened, isolated woman that everyone around her was an enemy, and that her only safe move was to sit in front of a camera and bleed for the nation. Her vulnerability was not incidental to that broadcast. Her vulnerability was the product, and her younger brother, by these accounts, had unwittingly held the door open. When the full truth about how that interview was engineered finally came to light years later, it reportedly hit Charles Spencer like a landslide. Because it meant he had played a part, however innocent, music, however unknowing, in one of the most profound exploitations of his sister's suffering during her lifetime. Think about what that does to a person. You spend your entire adult life believing you are your sister's protector. You stood in Westminster Abbey and told 2 billion people you would shield her sons. And then you learned that the single most psychologically damaging media event walked through a door you opened. Everything since by every account has been an act of atonement. The sealed archives, the refusals decade after decade, The decision to bury her at Althorpe rather than hand her to the institution, the unseen home movies, the handwritten diaries nobody outside the Spencer family has ever read. He has been doing penance, making absolutely certain that nothing like Panorama can ever happen to Diana again, even in death, even now, even 30 years later. And in doing so, music, he has achieved something extraordinary, something almost no famous figure of the modern era has been granted. He has protected Diana's mystery. There is a private Diana the world has never consumed, a real, unguarded, fully human version of her. And she exists only because one man keeps saying no. Now put yourself in his chair. You have spent 28 years atoning for one introduction. You have turned down every network, every publisher, every production company, every offer. And then a courier arrives with a proposal that wants the diaries your sister wrote in her own hand. The home movies of her as a child running across the lawns of Althorpe, the island where you buried her. All of it. Every last piece of the vault you have been protecting since 1997. And it wants all of it to serve a story that ends not with Diana, but with Meghan Markle wearing her halo. What do you say? Honestly, tell me in the comments what would you say. The pitch and why Charles Spencer called it a joke. Let me tell you exactly what was inside that proposal. Because once you hear the full list of what they reportedly asked for, the response stops looking like aristocratic contempt and starts looking like the only rational answer a man in his position could give. The pitch was a grand anniversary documentary for 2027. 30 years since the Paris Tunnel, 30 years of grief, 30 years of unanswered questions, an emotional, cinematic, definitive Diana film fronted by her own son. On paper, it sounds compelling. Netflix reportedly loved it instantly. The streaming budget was reportedly substantial. The intent on the surface appeared to be a love letter to Diana's memory. But here is what the project reportedly required. And listen closely, because this list is everything. They wanted Althorpe itself, the childhood home, the grounds, the lake, the island. They wanted the private family archives. They reportedly wanted access to Diana's personal handwritten diaries, pages she wrote for herself, never for the public. They wanted home movies that have never been seen publicly, the unguarded footage, the real private Diana that no one outside the Spencer family has ever touched. Without those elements, this would be just another history documentary assembled from the same recycled clips as every other one made in the last 30 years. With them, it would be the definitive Diana film of the century. And there was one more thing, one angle. The angle that made the pitch truly irresistible to the people selling it and catastrophic to the man reading it. They reportedly wanted to draw a straight, explicit line between Diana's war with the establishment and Meghan's war with the same forces. They wanted to position Meghan Markle as the modern continuation of Diana's story, the 21st century version of the woman who refused to be silenced. Diana's halo formally transferred. Think about what Charles Spencer saw when he read that. He had watched the jewelry. He had watched the Oprah interview. He had watched the Netflix documentary series in which a couple fleeing the media framed themselves explicitly as hunted by the same machine that destroyed Diana. He had watched piece by piece as Diana's tragedy was converted into someone else's origin story without a single phone call to Althorpe. And now they wanted the vault, the diaries, the island, the originals to crown a successor. Of course, he said what he said. Honestly, the only surprise is that he kept it to 4 words. The Sussex Empire on the edge. Why the stakes were this high. To understand why this documentary mattered so desperately to the Sussex operation, you need to look at the state of their media empire in early 2026. And I will warn you plainly, it is not a pretty picture. The $100 million Netflix deal, the 5-year arrangement that bankrolled the California dream, had been hanging by a thread. The flagship project meant to steady the ship was the lifestyle series with Love Meghan. Instead, it became the iceberg. The reviews came in thick, fast, and brutal. The Evening Standard gave it 4 stars and still couldn't resist mocking it on the way out. The Times gave it 2 stars and described it, and I genuinely treasure this phrase, as surely dull. The Daily Telegraph also landed on 2 stars, calling it an exercise in narcissism filled with extravagant brunches, music, celebrity pals, and business plugs. And then there was The Guardian. Pay close attention here, because The Guardian is no royalist publication. This is a paper that has long favored abolishing the monarchy and repeatedly condemned the treatment of Meghan. If any outlet in British print was predisposed to love this show, it was them. They gave it 1 star. One of their writers suggested it might be the last thing Meghan ever makes for Netflix. When the spectrum of British media, from Republican broadsheet to Royal Fan Weekly, all converge on the same verdict: that is not a review problem. That is a product problem. And here is the detail that sharpens everything. The couple's debut documentary, Harry and Meghan, which unpacked their exit from royal life, remains the most watched debut in Netflix's history. That fact is the skeleton key to this entire saga. Their subsequent projects, Heart of Invictus, Polo, With Love, Meghan, each met progressively cooler responses. The message from the audience could not be louder if they wrote it in the sky. The world is not interested in Meghan's lifestyle brand. The world is interested in royal wounds. The only Sussex product that has ever truly sold is proximity to the crown and to Diana. The Netflix deal was reportedly due to expire, with renewal anything but certain. The Spotify arrangement had already folded. The American Riviera Orchard lifestyle venture was not gaining the traction they needed. According to royal commentator Ian Peelham-Turner, losing Netflix would be a major blow from which recovery would be immensely difficult. Do you see what the Diana documentary actually was? It was not a passion project. It was a rescue flare. The single card in the deck guaranteed to draw a global audience because it was the one card printed with the only royal story bigger than their own exit. And the man at Althorpe tore it up with 4 words. The brand audit. How Diana became unlicensed currency. Let me give you a frame for what was really happening beneath the surface of all of this. Strip out the emotion for a moment and look at the assets. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties and surrendered the use of their HR styles, they had to build a commercial life on something. What they had was fame with an expiry date and one asset more bankable than every other combined. Diana, her face, her myth, her martyrdom. In business terms, the Sussexes had been trading on a brand without a license because the actual licensor, the keeper of the archive, the controller of the estate, the owner of the originals, was a 62-year-old man in Northamptonshire, whom nobody in the Sussex operation had apparently thought to consult. Every ring worn on a red carpet, every panorama echo in a confessional interview, every hunted like Diana framing in a Netflix production. Each one was an unauthorized withdrawal from the Diana account. And here's the thing about unauthorized withdrawals. They work beautifully until the day you need the bank manager to approve a real loan. Watch the escalation in the ledger. 2018, the aquamarine ring at the wedding reception. The first borrowing received warmly. Then the butterfly earrings, music, the Cartier watch, the bracelets, each time to a guaranteed photograph. 2021, the Oprah interview, the panorama architecture rebuilt from the ground up. Then the Netflix documentary series, her tragedy converted into their origin story. And finally, 2026, a request for the vault itself, the diaries, the home movies, Althorpe as a film set, the halo fitted to a new head. They began by borrowing her jewelry. They ended by asking for her soul. Each withdrawal was larger than the last. Each one was made without consulting the man who keeps the account. And the final one bounced. The letter. The move nobody saw coming. Now we arrive at the piece of this story that transforms everything. The development that most royal coverage has either missed entirely or buried in a single paragraph. Charles Spencer, by all accounts, did not make his decision in a vacuum, and sources close to the palace have been quietly describing a relationship that most royal watchers have been sleeping on completely. The understanding between Diana's brother and Diana's eldest son. It is no secret that Prince William has been privately furious for years about the commercialization of his mother's image. But understand William's position. He is the future king. Every action he takes produces consequences. I think it's safe to say that music change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that, and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me. He cannot publicly block his own brother's media projects without manufacturing a global headline about palace censorship and family warfare. When the institution blocks something, it always reads as the establishment protecting itself. But when Diana's own brother, the man who stood in Westminster Abbey and vowed before 2 billion people to protect her sons, calls a project a joke, that is not institutional control. That is family honor. Nobody can spin it. There is no palace to blame. There is only one brother telling another brother exactly what he thinks of what is being done with their sister's memory. Do you see the elegance of it? The one man free to say no is the one man whose no cannot be weaponized. William never had to lift a finger. And I would suggest to you that this is not coincidence so much as alignment. Two guardians of the same memory arriving at the same wall from different directions. Think of it this way. When two governments cannot speak without losing face, the message travels through a back channel, a private citizen, an elder statesman, someone with standing on both sides and a uniform on neither. The envoy says the unsayable precisely because he holds no office. That is exactly the role Charles Spencer now occupies in this family conflict. He is standing with the public, blood ties to both princes, moral title to Diana's memory, and no constitutional position whatsoever. The palace cannot tell Netflix no without a scandal. William cannot tell Harry no without a headline. But the Earl of Northamptonshire can tell everyone no in 4 words before breakfast. And the only institution that takes the hit is Montecito.